So good morning, everyone. So what we wanted to do actually is chat a little bit about kind of our evolution. Both of us kind of are companies that just recently raised big rounds and are going through some pretty interesting changes and kind of been through various journeys from bootstrapping our way to where we are today. And so that's what we'll talk a little bit about. So I wanted to start off by just, Alan, asking you, you just recently raised a big B round. You raised an A round previously. You've kind of previously were bootstrapping. Could you just give us a sense of what's at a high level changed between those different phases?
So we spent a lot of time pre-financing it all. So when we first started the company, and this is a long time ago, actually even more than 10 years, this is probably 15 years old now, we did a very, very small friends and family round. So this is 2001, 2002. And of course, there was no investor at that time that was going to put money into a pre-revenue startup. So we did do a very small friends and family round that kept us going. And then it was really a long time of real struggle, really trying to figure out, how to figure out something that was actually going to scale and grow. And I really liken it to the feeling of pushing string. That was really the first set number of years of the company. It was really hard, and we really didn't have product market fit then.
What's your product, by the way, for the audience?
Sure. So we have an online dashboard, a real-time dashboard. We sell to small, mid-sized businesses. And we now have lots of customers. We have 8,500 customers globally. But if I was to draw a chart of how many customers we had for the first 10 years, it was basically flat. And then really it's only been in the past couple of years that it's been rocketing in the right direction. So the first couple of years was really, actually not couple, first 10 years was really a huge struggle in trying to find product market fit. And we sometimes kidded ourselves in saying that we've got something and we should go out to market, we should raise some funds, but we didn't have the right metrics to do so. We didn't have something that we could accelerate by pouring money in the top. And then once we did, we launched the cloud-based version with a different business model, and I mean, we can get into that maybe, in 2012. And it was only then that we started seeing the metrics go in the right direction. And all of a sudden we had the efficiencies and growth metrics that said we should put money in the top and we will see further growth, which is what we did. So it was really, and I think a lot of companies go through this, where you really struggle with this product market fit. And it's really difficult because you get these false positives, thinking that you have something. You have a couple of customers, and those customers trick you into believing that there's something there of value. Whereas really, it's just a couple of customers that have adopted your product and nothing more. And I think that's very, very difficult to sort of tease apart. And it was a very different feeling. Like once we launched our cloud business, our cloud product with the new business model, all of a sudden we felt the pull of this market. And the product started selling almost on its own. And I think that was a huge eye-opener for me, just a different feeling. And I've talked to, I mean, you probably have it too, I've talked to a lot of CEOs or founders where, they struggle with how do we get marketing? How do we get leads coming in? How do we sell? And if you're asking those kind of questions, you probably don't have a marketing or sales problem. You probably have a product market fit problem. Yeah. If you're asking questions about how do we scale and how do we hire employees, then you probably have product market fit. And you don't have to worry about leads and sales and stuff like that. So,
yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I tend to agree in sort of, so our business is, we're basically, think of us as Alibaba or eBay for grain. We help farmers sell their grain, and we help anyone who's looking for grain find that grain. Any farmers in the house, by the way? I know it's distant. Oh, good.
Oh, we got
good.
one.
We do.
Dude.
Good. That's cool.
Awesome.
So, in our case, we're a marketplace, right? Yeah. So you need this critical mass of buyers and sellers. And I think one of the areas where we had these lights of false hope, where we were pretty active in Western Canada, trying to build a base of buyers and sellers there. And the key thing in a marketplace is you want critical mass, where you have enough buyers and sellers that people just realize, oh, there's something going on here, and they start showing up on their own. And we had these last summer, I think it's these periods of like, oh, it's starting to pick up, we're starting to see our snowball. we could start plowing energy into a new market, start building a new region where it's kind of start from the bottom up, find buyers and sellers, and start creating your marketplace. And we realized, you know what? That isn't quite it. Like, it's not happening on its own. We still need to push it in Western Canada. And so there's always this moment if you think you've got it, and then you realize I got to go back into it, and I can't assume it's rolling on its own.
No, and I've heard that as well. I've heard it's so difficult to sort of predict when the hockey stick is going to happen, and there's so many false positives along the way that, you know, hindsight is always 20/20. You know that it has happened, but to predict or to know when it is happening is very, very difficult. So on your side, I mean, what was the indicator? What made you say, okay, we got to go out for a seed round, for example?
Yeah, so I think the seed round was largely because we'd built an initial sort of scrappy version, and it was picking up. Like, we had users, and it was like we were able to prove we had a couple of first users. But it was also, well, we now got to we're running out of cash, so, you know, if we want to do the next little set of things we're looking to do, but also actually try to market the product now that we've tested it in a beta version, we need a bit of money to do that. And so that was sort of the trigger for that. And then that I think one of the things we did very well in that period, you know, speaking of how to be scrappy and have good tactics, is we actually managed to leverage our seed round for every $2 we brought in our seed round, we were able to get an extra $1 of non-dilutive funding. You know, we really worked and spent a lot of time writing quality grants, looking at all the sources we could tap. You know, we got a mix of support from federal, provincial entities, and that really helped us gain an extra, you know, 6 months of timeline that really helped us get us to the Series A position. But the interesting thing is at the Series A, you know, I'll quote literally what one of our investors said was, there's hope on the horizon. And so it was like, is that a strong endorsement? And they said, well, you know, it's not like we're investing on the numbers here because you still have work to do, but there's some positive signs. And I always think of like the Series A round, you're selling the dream and the team. And that's one of the things I think we did very well. You know, my business partner and I are farmers, so we're scrappy, we're resourceful, we know how to work hard, and we're frugal. We're cheap. Farmers are cheap. And so, you know, those are some of the things that helped us along the way.
So kudos to you, because I actually think selling the dream is more difficult. I think there's less cases where a CEO can actually sell the dream by reducing the risk enough. Investors are generally, they don't like risk, right? And even when you're investing in a seed round where there is more risk, they generally they don't want to have that. They want to see evidence. So, you know, you generally, if you're going out to market, I mean, the earlier you are, the more you have to sell a dream, but you know, there's generally companies that go out and they do sell that dream, or maybe they're a CEO that has done it and had an exit or had a success in the past, or you're telling a data story. And if you're telling a data story, you have evidence. You know, so for us, we were telling a data story. When we launched our product, our cloud-based product in 2012, we very quickly grew from 0 customers to 350 to 1,100. And that's when we said, hey, you know, there's actually some metrics here, some numbers, and some growth evidence that we could go out and tell a story with. But it was a data story first, a vision story second, you know, which I think puts the terms into a different light. And for us, we weren't maybe. I mean, it's awesome to hear that. You know, you were there running out of money, and I mean, it makes for a good story. We weren't quite running out of money. We were at the seed stage. We were saying, hey, do we continue funding it through operations and maybe do a 2x the following year, or could we put money in the top and do a 3x? So we had that optionality, which I think is important too. Now let me ask you a question. When you did your seed round, were you able to show an increase over what the plan B would have been without funding, or would the plan B have been we run out of money?
Yeah, I think, you know, the plan B, we were able to be like, listen, we've got, this hope is actually early momentum. We've done a lot of different experiments of, you know, small advertising campaigns. We know where we are and sort of where we are today, and, you know, cost of customer acquisition, return on getting new customers. We were able to show a very clear roadmap of, if we put money behind this, this is what we think we can get to in 6 months and 12 months and 18 months. And we were like, well, the alternative is we keep scrapping away. We actually probably have to even downsize a little bit, and we'll go back to the trenches. But, you know, the reality is there will be competitors that will start showing up around us. And so which team do you want to bet on? The ones that have some pretty good indicators of hope on the horizon and things are starting to happen, but they need some fuel to keep moving. And that was kind of how we put it together.
Did you, so you've done 2 rounds?
So we did, yeah, friends and family and then the A round, yeah.
Did you find you had some inefficiencies or spun your wheels as soon as you got the cash in?
Yeah, yeah, good one. Yeah, I mean, I think if I bring it to today, I think one of the biggest blind sights or things we kind of don't fully appreciate is growing is kind of 2 things. One is you got to grow your foundations, you got to get organized, but then you also then have to grow the business. And when we raised this latest round, I was like always in my mind, I'm an ops guy, I like to get organized and get processes running and whatnot. It's going to take us really 6 months to get really organized or at a level where pretty much everything is in place before we can really focus solely on the business, which is that we got about 2 months to go and then it's going to be, full throttle on everything. Now the reality though is you still need to focus on the growth piece and the growing the business side of it, but you're just juggling and putting a lot of hours. But I think the key thing is, the effort that it takes to find the right people, to get organized. Like my business partner and I spend a lot of time recruiting the team that we've built. I mean, we've hired 12 people in the span of 3 months. And every single person, we had 2 or 3 conversations with them. It's a full process. And you look back at it and you're kind of saying, whew, like we're not moving. But at the other hand, you're like, wait a minute, like hiring 12 people in 3 months is insane. Like we're actually making huge progress. It's just, I want to now focus on driving the business.
So you do your round and then you sort of plateau for a bit. Exactly. And then you can sort of step on the gas. So I've had a different experience where with almost every round, you're really on top of the world. You've got all this fresh funding, and no matter how disciplined or how hard you try, you start putting a little bit too much into advertising. And the advertising produces a little bit of, a crappy result, and you spin your wheels. And I've seen this, and I've talked to other folks too, right? It's really difficult to sort of not get ahead of yourself if you have this cash. Now, the cash has to be used, right? And the cash is there, and if you don't use it, it's actually a fault of you managing the business. But it's really difficult to use that efficiently.
One question. If you look back at sort of the pre-money phase,
yep.
2020 hindsight is always awesome. What's the one thing you would have done differently?
I think we would have been more brutal about what we were seeing with our product. So in the early days, we grew to about 150 customers, but it was a very long sales cycle. We found that each customer was asking for something slightly different. I think we probably would have said, you know what? There's enough evidence here, truthfully, that this is not working. But that was the real difficulty. There was also just enough evidence to tell us that there was something that was working. So we were in that real dilemma of, is it or is it not working? And I think we were in that state for too long. We didn't pull the trigger and say, you know what, guys, we need to retool or we need to pivot. And again, we were just like the many companies that come and talk to me about how do you get leads and how do you sell. I had the same problem. We did not have product market fit. So had we done something differently, I would have probably experimented more. And that's something that we've adopted in sort of the past probably 5-6 years. We experiment like crazy. Our marketing teams, the org structure, A/B tests on pricing. I don't think anything goes out the door that we cannot somehow measure. I mean, we're a dashboard company, so that makes sense. But really, there's a research culture and a testing culture that really goes along with things. And you test it, you move on. You test it, you move on, and you always try to pick the big thing. And had we had that culture in the early years, we would have found our way much more quickly. And I think that's a huge lesson that investing in that kind of culture, I think, makes a big difference.
I think particularly on the notion of testing, I think one of the mistakes that we'll often make as entrepreneurs is we think that every test or every new thing we want to try has to be built on technology. And very often you realize, like, you know what? If I want to try, let's make a very specific example. I'm going to try a new marketing campaign where I'm going to, at our particular pace, try to get people to post grade for sale without actually creating an account. You could build a whole piece of software behind this to get this done, but the quick hack is actually just make a simple form, test the campaign, and send the data to an email and have someone manually create the account for that person. Because without spending a month of building that technical solution, you could put this up in a day and know within a week or two if this is an approach that is going to work.
Totally. And I mean, in the early days too, I mean, similar to that idea of being efficient, you do things that are totally not scalable, but you do them because they're not production ready yet, right? You don't want to invest time in a framework necessarily. Now, I'm a huge fan of frameworks and the efficiency and everything else, but in the early days, I mean, we were doing things that we were manually, processing credit cards, typing in the numbers. Totally not scalable. Totally not scalable. But we did it until we had enough evidence that okay, we need to start automating this. Let me back up to the early days, sort of pre-funding. How did you survive pre-funding? How were you funded? Was it sales? Was it friends and family? Was it government funding?
So, I mean, the money part was the friends and family and extra help from grants and whatnot and being scrappy. But I think one of the things that we did, speaking of things that don't scale, is we have a platform where we need to convince grain sellers, farmers mostly, and grain buyers to connect. Our product wasn't quite there. There were parts of it where they weren't actively kind of setting themselves up and coming back to the platform. So we were like, we need to invest heavily on sort of guiding the users through the process. And so, one feature that we had was this notion of you got to create this watch list that kind of tells you, if I'm someone that's looking to buy wheat, just alert me when there's a new listing for wheat that I might want to engage with. And people weren't creating it because our UX was crooked, but we didn't have time to fix it. So we were like literally set the mandate we had 3 customer support reps, and we said, you're going to go down the entire list of everyone and just manually set up these watch lists. You're going to call them, you're going to ask them, roughly what kind of grain they're looking to buy or sell, and you're going to set that watch list manually. And it kind of took 3 or 4 months, but after that, we started seeing the fruits of that, whereby we started seeing that this was pulling the users back in, And that was a good thing. Now, the second thing, though, is we were also seeing, people were, looking at it, but not kind of knowing what to do. And so we literally started paying grade brokers. We were literally, as much as we wanted to be a digital platform where no one touched it, part of our work, part of what our team was doing was kind of literally being calling the buyer, having a bit of a relationship with the grade buyer, be like, hey, I've got these 2-3 offers up here you might be interested in. Are you interested in putting in an offer? And what we would do is do the first step for them. And then they'd be like, oh, I can log in and do this myself. And at some point, we were able to let them go. But that was the type of stuff that if we had simply said, let's be purists here, a marketplace, you should never touch it, it's got to scale, let's not touch it, the thing wouldn't be moving. And so now we've got it moving that way, we kind of got the wheel spinning. The trick is now to figure out how to move away and gradually get it to a point where it's fully scalable. And those are just the things you have to do. Nothing is perfect when you start.
But how did you get money coming into the company in the early days? I mean, if I look at our early days, my co-founder sold his car. We did websites, like totally unrelated websites. We begged and pleaded with our vendors to give us some relief from paying their bills. We worked in our basements. We also did shred, of course, like crazy, and we went after IRAP. I think there's so many opportunities for companies to gain that traction before they even think about doing an equity round, and potentially never do an equity round. How do you survive and make those first years doable? Because a lot of companies will think, well, we're starting up, and the first thing that I have to do is I have to raise money. And that's completely backwards, right? You've got to somehow survive and prove something out first. But to do that, you probably need to take a second job. So
Yeah.
were there things like that you had to do?
Yeah, so I mean, there were a couple of things. I think, you know, when I kind of jumped into it, I was coming off a well-paying job and I was comfortable, so you built a bit of a cushion. And I've always,
for sure.
as a life lesson, I've always taken the idea of live below my means, kind of classic farmer education, I guess. But that helped create the buffer to take a year and a half, 2 years of full-on risk.
I love that you said that, because I really think you need to have, you know, and you talk to your partner, your wife, your husband around this, you got to have 2 years. If you start something, you have to say, I have 2 years of buffer, because it's going to take probably 4, right? So really, you know, make sure you've got some sort of a plan to survive, you know, those first couple of years.
And I think the support network, super important. Have people who are kind of are part of your critical mission in getting this done. I mean,
you did friends and family?
So we did friends and family. You know, and there's the classic notion.
Who was the most difficult person you asked in the friends and family?
Actually, the more sophisticated friends that were financial people, because they were putting a lens of, I need full-on metrics. They were working at sovereign wealth funds, and we're like, guys, you're not investing in a $200 million revenue company with super predictable stuff. There is no revenue here. Like, you just got to believe me.
Well, we didn't have any revenue either, but I mean, I asked my fiance's parents for $10,000. I was hooked. That was it.
So, you know, on my end, certainly a bit of help from, you know, my parents, but also my wife's parents. You know, my wife calls herself FarmLead's biggest investor, and, you know, there's a fair amount of grain of truth to that. Grain, no pun intended, but it's always easy at FarmLead. So, yeah, no, a lot of this stuff. The other thing is we got creative on other sources of revenue. So, you know, we have a fair amount of grain market expertise, and we basically started syndicating our column. You know, we gave this content out for free as a marketing tool and an SEO tool for us to create credibility. But any chance we got to be like, you want to print this thing in your local ag newspaper, you're going to pay us for it. You know, you want us to go on a speaking circuit, and this is my business partner who does this. You know, I'm happy to show up. You got to pay me the big bucks, right? And so those were kind of ways of inflating the revenue part of the business that wasn't the core business.
Yeah, I think in the early days too. I mean, for the product companies out there, in the early days, you can get a lot of professional services revenue coming in from your early customers. They're more than willing to help you build the product, and they will pay for it too. So I think we've got to go to some
Q&A.
questions. Yeah.
That's right. We're going to take a couple of questions from the floor. We're here. We're running a little bit behind schedule, not unfortunately due to these guys. I babbled a little too long this morning on the intro, so I don't want to cut any of the good stuff out, but we're going to take 2 questions now, and then these guys are sticking around for today, so we'll be able to hobnob with them at the network breaks as well. We have this great catch box. Talk about technology in action. This thing can be dropped and will not break. You speak right into the box if you have any questions, and we'll take 2 from the floor. Nancy, one of my Number Crunch colleagues, is here to circulate the box. Any questions? Do not miss an opportunity to ask questions. Oh, there we go.
Just speak into this? Yeah. Oh, cool. I have the floor. I'm really curious with the early days in both your businesses, how you managed to make your marketing successful. I've heard that from both of you that you had very different client bases, some being the users, some being the business to business coming to that. So how did you handle that from a digital point of view? And did you find that there was a lot of wastage of finances doing that?
Yeah, why don't you start?
Yeah, so the question is, you know, how did we figure out how to do our marketing and particularly the digital side of it? So I think first thing is not everything needs to be digital, right? There's a bit of this notion that, oh, digital's the cool thing and all marketing needs to be digital. But if you kind of look at your audience, like, you know, you deal with SMEs, you know, a farmer is a bit of a small, medium-sized business. There's not always full digital savviness, so you do have to go out there and do some elements of brand building. A farmer audience is also, you have to build trust. Both Brendan and I come from the farm. We were educated as farmers, and you know, we like to say farmers can smell bullshit from 2 miles away. So the key thing there was to be willing to accept that you got to try different things. Now, free ways is show you have credibility. So invest time in writing content that's free. You just got to do the research, and we write about grain markets. Go to a couple key trade shows to kind of show who you are. And then what we did do is we did try some digital, like paid ad, but we were kind of very disciplined. We got a lot of great coaching from actually the folks at Invest Ottawa on how to do digital campaigns and gradually get deeper and deeper into it. But what we found is we could be super strategic and really pick the areas we went after because the sector is wide open. Lawrence, our SEO person, he was saying last week, the sector's so wide open, the biggest competitor on digital marketing is an agricultural-related high school teacher who uses math examples on grain marketing. So that creates an open space, and finding that space is sort of where we like to play into. And concretely, what it meant is also, like even in a market like Ontario, we find that we'll get that first initial traction from the lowest hanging fruit or the biggest pain point. And so in Ontario, for example, Ontario produces a lot of corn, soybeans, wheat, but there are people trying to sell oats, barley, things like that. And so we quickly realized if we went after the niche cereals, we had a lot more uptick because those were the toughest cereals to market as a farmer in a particular market. I mean, we even got to a point that we were finding farmers trying to sell oats in the pet section of Kijiji because they were trying to sell pony oats in the pet section. And we're like, you're lost among, the dog food and the cat food, and you're trying to sell oats. Do you know we have a marketplace for this? So those are some of the things. Just kind of really understand, are there areas that you can go pick at and specialize yourself in the digital front particularly?
So maybe I'll add just a few words to that. So in the early days, I think it's really important for the founder to be the chief marketing person. And I mean, there's so much interest and genuine ability to relate to people from a CEO or from a founder that I think that's the best way that you can communicate and also learn from your market. So, take advantage of that. We early on, we invested heavily in content marketing and in SEO. That worked very well for us. We have a very global market, and again, lots of free content on our site that speaks to our audience to get them in. And you have to develop this funnel of, how much intent is there in wanting to buy your product, right? But if you can get them in, nurture them, and then eventually get them into a trial, that works very well for us. Now, I don't know your space, but if you're really early, I would definitely start with, you being the chief marketing person. Start building that out. Make sure you've got an amazing product, because without that, it doesn't matter how you market. And then try different things, try different channels. And as Alain was saying, it's not all digital. It could be other channels as well.
Yeah.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Precious, and I am in the farming business. So I have a question for both of you guys. I want to find out how, what keeps you inspired and what made you choose farming, and how do you keep, the motivation up to now, up to today? So yeah.
That's a really, really good question. And you know what? I think it is actually at the core of why everybody's here today, right? Why are we doing this? I always joke with folks that I don't know what else I would be doing. I love doing this, but if I dissect that, I love working with other inspired people, right, to solve a problem. And for me, it's the idea that we could make other companies more successful. So, most small businesses fail within 5 years. It's a staggering amount of companies that just don't make it past that 5 years. Could we, with our business, with our dashboarding business, and with our, the way we guide people and educate people and tell them what matters and what's important and all the rest, could we make that half as many businesses that fail in 5 years? That's an awesome idea. Could we do that? Think of the anxiety that we'd be getting rid of. Think of the wealth that we'd be creating for these people. Just totally awesome. So if you get like-minded people, there's no question about motivation. It's a fast-moving, like just stream that just carries you forward, right? And you know, you work with the right people, and you're doing the right mission and helping companies. I mean, I love going to work. It's amazing, right? So I don't know if that's it's a precise answer, but that's the way I feel about it.
If I'll add a little bit to that. I think, you know, there's always this passion of doing something right for the customer. And, you know, my business partner, we do have a little bit of the challenges. Not everyone understands farmers and understand what our app means in the hands of a farmer. So we really try to invest time in getting our team to also appreciate, you know, what is the mission, what we're trying to accomplish here, and what, you know, beyond sort of appreciating success of the product in our customer's hand, what really excites me is to kind of share it with the team of like, this is working, it's awesome. And I love to kind of be able to take a step back, especially now we've been recruiting so much, to be like, wow, like we have a team, we have a group of awesome people, all this energy, all this creativity. They want to get stuff done. We just got to make everyone align into what is the ultimate goal here. And then if we could figure out how to all work together well, it's awesome. Like, it's super exhilarating, especially because there are moments where it gets a little tougher. And it's awesome to be able to kind of step back and rely on the group around you. And so a lot of that is creating transparency on who's the customer, what are we doing for them, and how are we performing against that goal of making their life better. So, you know, very often you tend to think, oh, you know, as the leadership, you don't want to share everything. Actually, it's the opposite. The more you share, the more everyone feels like I'm part of this and I can pitch in and contribute to it. And so, you know, that's a very important component for us of keeping everyone excited and moving forward.
I'll add, Susan, one last comment. So it is binary though. Like, I think the motivation is either, I think for a lot of founders, it is either you're on top of the world, or there is just tremendous despair, right? There really is this binary emotion. And so my CFO has this saying that I remind myself all the time. And of course a CFO would say this. He says, Alan, things are never as good or as bad as you think they are. You know, even keel, right? So I don't know if I can really truly live that, but at least that helps a bit. So, okay, awesome. Thanks, Alain. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.